Good morning. So I am with Kushal. So I am right now in Lyon in the eastern part of France. And I am very happy to interview Kushal because we've been trying many times and finally we can make it. So where are you based right now, Kushal?
Good morning, bonjour. It's so nice to see Dorothy from Lyon. So, a quick bit about myself. I am from Bangalore and currently I am in India in Bangalore and I'm taking this interview from here.
Who are you and what do you do?
I will give you a very short story about myself.
Yes, this is what makes it interesting.
I'm a Bangalorean born and raised in Bangalore, and being in India, being in Bangalore particularly, I was brought up in a city with multiple cultures, which also spoke multiple languages. So as a child, I grew up learning and speaking at least three South Indian languages and pretty much had the same dream of engineering versus, medicine, which is a typical Indian dream for most people. I wanted to be a medical professional doctor in very simple words. So I was preparing for my medical education, but for unforeseen reasons, I did not pursue it and I took a different course of life. I landed in hospitality, which is basically hotel management. I was working for hotels and I was working for airlines. So that's the domain that I came into. And I suddenly stumbled upon this opportunity of learning French at the Alliance Française de Bangalore. And that's my first tryst or my first date with French. So
Okay.
this is where I started my journey and my education. And eventually, because of the fact that I spoke French and I did not really I did not want to continue my career in hospitality because of multiple reasons. One is, of
Okay.
course, it's physically very hard,
It
it's
is.
physically very taxing. And unfortunately, the pay regulations are absent in most industries and more so worse in hospitality. So I was looking for a better career option. And as a result of knowing languages, I moved into a corporate career. And today I work in IT. I work for Google as a program manager. And that's about me.
Very good. So this is a very rich introduction. So you were talking about French, and because I'm teaching French and other languages, I'm always curious about the reason why people want to learn French. So what was your main reason?
Okay. Honestly speaking, when I was a student, I also didn't really know too much about many foreign languages in India, especially people teaching different languages. Like having institutes where they would teach foreign languages was very little when I started learning French. But one of the things I knew about French was the hospitality. Since was already from hospitality, the French classical menu, the whole, gastronomy that emerges from France. So there's a strong connection. So I got interested in French, one. And secondly,
Mm.
if I see the number of countries where French is an official language and is spoken, right, besides France, it is really huge. I think Latin America and Spanish is obviously catching up. But when I used to see the French colonies across the world and the number of countries where French is an official language and one of the, widely spoken languages out of the top five widely spoken languages,
Mhm.
I definitely thought that, wow, this is really great because now when you look at learning a language, one is, of course, I loved the language. I loved the fact that it sounds chic.
A lot of foreigners say that, and I think it's a very interesting comment.
Yes. Besides that, appealing to a young mind like me, I think the culture and the history of gastronomy, of movies, of art, of culture intrigued me a lot. And secondly, the fact that it's spoken in so many different countries, I thought that if I want to pick a job on the basis of a language, on the basis of merit of knowing a language, pick something where, there's a lot of availability instead of maybe say, picking
Mm.
a very, very less known language. Say, for example, I don't mean to disrespect any language, but say, for example, if I was trying to learn Croatian, what are my employment opportunities? So that's also something I weighed in while I chose French.
Okay, well, that's an interesting story and that's an interesting reason. And we together, we know other Indians who are your friends and who learned French. And sometimes when we're together, we speak French. And I'm always honored to have people to learn my language. And since this podcast is a lot about culture, when you learn French, what did you discover in terms of differences between your culture and the culture of France or many or other French speaking countries? Like, because when we learn a language, we also learn a culture. So could you maybe say something that you found interesting
Sure.
compared to your Indian culture?
Absolutely. I think, as somebody rightly put it, language is not just a medium of communication. For me, genuinely, as much as people have said it, I've understood that language is a window that opens an opportunity and a door to multiple cultures. That's one of the things I very strongly believe in. And if
Mhm.
you ask me why does culture have to be so strongly linked to language? I would say that to understand certain things, knowing a certain language is very important. As they say, lost in translation, that's not a terminology that was just invented out of nowhere. There are
That's
things that do get lost in translation. It's not, I mean, I think we have the best of translation tools. We have people who are extremely talented at doing translation and interpretation. But what is said in a particular language, sometimes does not translate really well into any other language, and it just fits that context as much.
mhm,
So that is the first thing that I would talk about when it comes to culture. And secondly,
mhm,
when we're talking about what did I find interesting in the French culture versus, my own Indian culture, I think one of the things I really admire about the French culture, right, is the fact that people have these socializing events in cafes, which are, traditionally, if you look at cafes in India,
mm.
cafes are a borrowed concept. They never existed in Indian culture. So Indian
Okay.
culture was always about restaurants and never anything to do with quick service restaurants or fast foods as we call them today. But India's culture was mainly about coffee shops. When I say coffee shops, they would just serve coffee and a few eats, as well as restaurants that would serve proper food. Now, when
Mm.
we talk about the cafe culture, which is one of the most interesting things that I find in France, the cafe culture is not just about going into a place and, grabbing a cup of coffee and quickly gulping that coffee and running away. So the whole concept of going to a cafe is to, I think I would say like de se détendre, as in literally to relax oneself and, to have a cultural connection, to talk
Yeah,
to people.
because in France and in some European places, you have a terrace and you sit down and
Exactly.
you sip your coffee or your tea or your whatever you're drinking and you look at people.
Exactly.
Sometimes you can talk to people next to you.
Exactly. So that's
And you
one of
would
the
say
social
that in India, this is like a faster culture.
Correct. So the cafe culture, definitely one thing, of course, legal, regulations do not allow cafes to serve alcohol and certain other aperitifs or, certain
Mm,
other shots and drinks. But in France, I view it more as a culture than a place to just go and drink or eat food, right? Like eat,
mhm,
short bites. That's not the culture.
mhm.
So I think the whole culture of going to a cafe is about observing, relaxing yourself, connecting with other people, finding
That's
people whom
true.
you have very
Mm,
similar interests with, and probably forming a group in an interest group rather than just the work colleagues, right? Or your
mhm.
people that you know already in life. So that's something that I found really interesting. One of the things very interesting when we talked about, difference between India and France. Slowly, I think the Indian culture is evolving to get to such places, but this is one of the biggest things that came across to me.
Okay, well, this is very interesting. And if we go back to your culture, which is India, for me, India has so many cultures. We cannot say that India has one culture because it's such a
Absolutely.
rich country. So you say you are from Bangalore. So
Yes,
what would you say, like let's imagine someone who is listening to the podcast has never been to India or so Bangalore is in the south. So what would you say is striking about the south of India if you would compare it to another place in India?
certainly. I think firstly, for anybody who's, from outside of India and is visiting India, the first thing that you'll find very different from your own place maybe is the striking amount of color within India. Whether
That's
it-
true. Hmm.
whether it's the people, whether it's buildings, whether it's the way people dress, the colors on multiple items of daily use, colors are very, very bright and colors are very, very variedly used in India. That's one thing that really stands out in India. Now, talking about India to, in comparison, rest of India in comparison to South of India, right? So if you were to like look at the difference, right? Like how do you think you differ from the rest of India? Interestingly, I would say that, in the south of India, more or less, right? A lot of people are multilingual, which means that they just don't speak one language or they're not just bilingual, they are multilingual. That's one of the things that you very quickly notice. And if you're talking about very visible differences with people, one of the things I don't want to sound racist or based on color, but people do have a different complexion of skin in the south versus people
Yes,
in the
this is
north.
what I've noticed as well.
Yes. So that is one of the striking features. It is the genetics and it's the geographical adaptation that has
Mm,
happened to people. It's got nothing
yes.
to do with race. I want to, tell viewers that this is not a race based, this is definitely not something to do with race. It's mainly based on
Mm.
geographical adaptation of
Yeah,
people.
this is, I mean, even in my country, depending on where you go, people look differently. They are, like
Right.
we think this is the case of almost all countries.
Right.
Depending on where people are, they are taller, they are shorter, they are, their skin is brighter or a
Right.
little bit more brown. So, I think it's kind of international. But then when you work, when I say I live and I work in India, and I see it with the colleagues I have colleagues from everywhere. And I see some little differences between my colleagues depending on where they are from, because I see if someone wants to do business or work in India, I don't think I can say that there's one type of Indian behavior. I think it's very multicultural when you go to India. So when you work with Indian people yourself with Indians, what differences do you see in the way they work, for example?
Certainly. I think India being such a rich country with so many different regions and so many different states, and each one having their own practices. Even within one state, I think there are multiple practices based on which part of the state they belong to and where their origins are. So even within, like, when we talk about festivals, for example, like if I think of France, there's you have Le 14 Juillet, you have some of these
Mm-hmm.
very important festivals that are more or less celebrated across the country, but of course, in different ways of their own, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in India, if I was to see, like, with people that I work, right, two things that we notice is our approach to work is the communication styles are very different when we talk about,
That's true.
somebody from up north versus somebody from down south. And when I say communication language, I'm not communication style. I'm not necessarily talking about language, because English has definitely unified us in some ways, and we do
Yeah.
speak other regional languages. But I think in the aspect of how people are a little more, little more assertive when they are, from other places than the South, and people from the South are a lot more mellow. That's one of the things I see as a difference in working
Oh,
style.
okay. So in the way people communicate in the north of India compared to the south of India, like, do you have any professional experience where you communicated something in English to someone else who speaks English, but who was not from the same Indian place as you? Like, did you feel that there was like a kind of a disconnect?
Oh yes, that does happen, because especially what happens is that although English is a very commonly spoken language across India, but different people have very different proficiencies. Now, I told somebody a certain thing in English and say, "Hey, could you please give us a treat?" So when I said, "Could you please give us a treat?" because this person had recently got a promotion at work,
Hmm?
this person, what I meant typically was, we were expecting some sweets, like sweet treats. But this person actually thought that we were asking for a party and planned a lunch. And
Ah, okay. That's
so that's one of the
interesting.
things that I can definitely, relate to or talk about or think about.
But when you talk about treats, I have noticed this, at work when someone is celebrating a wedding or something special in their lives, they would come to work with something sweet.
Yes.
Like, oh, my daughter has just got married. Here is some sweets for you. Or today is a special celebration. Here are some sweets for you. And I think this is very cultural, because in my country, we don't do this. Like, if someone gets married, you don't come to work with, sweets or whatever. And one time I was invited to a wedding, and unfortunately I couldn't come because I was invited to another wedding in another country. However, when I came back, the friends of mine who married their daughter said, "Oh, we have to meet because we have a present for you." And I was so surprised, because in my country, we give the present to
Right.
the people who are getting married, but no one is going to give us a present. So I find that in India, this culture of treat or giving a present, for me, this was a very cultural, I wouldn't say it was a culture shock, but I was very surprised.
Yes.
And the present was interesting.
Yes.
So I not only could not show up to the wedding, and I got a present.
Yes.
So for me, that was an interesting cultural experience.
Yes. And I think on the same lines, right? The weddings in India are very populous compared to weddings in the rest of the world.
And in the north and in the south and in the east and the west, the way people get married is so different.
Is very different. And also the fact that the number of people in each Indian wedding is so huge
That's
comparatively,
true.
right? Because there
It's
are a few
thousands of
hundreds of
people.
people. I have attended weddings of family members that have been close to 3,000 to 4,000 people.
This is quite a lot.
Yes,
That's huge. This is like the size of a village in my country or the size of a small city.
exactly.
So this is very interesting.
Yeah.
And so you said you work in the hospitality business, and I'm sure you worked with different nationalities.
Yes.
And I'm sure that you saw some cultural differences. So do you have any, I don't know, any stories that you remember from people who were from different countries and you kind of misunderstood each other because
Yeah.
your way of communicating as an Indian person was different from your colleague from a different culture?
Absolutely. I think one of the things I can very clearly remember and go back to, right? If we look at, okay, I think this could be a little cryptic. When I say cryptic, I think this may need some censorship, but nevertheless. So I'm picking an example where we had a person who was from France, and I met this person at work, and I was speaking French, and this person was actually very intrigued and interested with the fact that I could speak reasonable, fluent French and not just like say bonjour, merci, and just have like, a very,
You could have a real conversation.
I could have a real conversation. Exactly. And I had another friend who was learning French and then, she was very interested in culinary exploration. And then she talked about the fact that, hey, can we, we should talk about, suddenly we wanted to talk about confiture. Confiture
Okay,
is
why not?
basically
Confiture means jam for
jam.
people who don't understand.
For those who don't know what confiture is, it's jam. And I think in France, there's a huge tradition of making jam at home rather than just buying it off the shelf, which is not the case in India. And we were very curious on how to make jam, etc. And then we were asking this person, this friend of mine was asking, hey, can you please teach us how to like make jam? Right. So, and this person was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's meet and like, let's, make it together. And then we
Mm-hmm.
were making this jam for the lack of like, so she was noting down what to make and how to make it. And obviously she said, do you add preservatives into this? Because she meant to like, understand or think that you would add something in it to preserve it for longer, like, to
Mm.
increase its shelf life. And the minute she used this word preservatives, the translation of that exactly goes to a totally different, it's a false cognate in French.
Yes, that's true.
And it goes to saying, preservative. And this person was very, puzzled. Is like, okay, what are we talking? Like, aren't we cooking? Like, why are we having this discussion? And
Yeah, because in French we are saying conservateur, so which is
exactly,
to conserve, but
conserve or
preservative for those who don't speak French means condom.
condoms.
So
Exactly.
probably that there was kind of a loss of translation in that case.
Yes. And the best
That's
part
an
was
interesting one.
I like the Frenchman's line that he responded with after looking all confused and puzzled. It's like, yeah, we use them in France, but not while we cook.
Yes, this was a very lost in translation experience.
Exactly.
And
And
this
so
is an
we kind of
interesting one.
misunderstood each other, but I think we quickly brought in more clarity, but we did misunderstand each other for a while.
This is an interesting one. And then in a professional setting, did you have, maybe with customers or because I know that in the hospitality, and I think this is more striking in the hospitality business because you do have some culture when they're not happy about something, they say it straight away. But in
Yes.
some other cultures, they are using indirect communication ways to make you understand that they were not happy about something. So, have you had this kind of experience, for
Yes. I
example?
think in India, especially, right, it's very easy to get people to understand that, hey, we are good. We don't need anything more. So Indians always feel that, like for example, if you are welcomed into a hotel and if you're trying to help a guest, irrespective of what the nationality or the origin of that person is, Indians keep asking the same question and never buy the final answer in general, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if somebody says, "Yeah, I'm fine. I've eaten enough. I'm comfortable," they'd be like, "Oh, are you sure? Is the fan fine? Is the air conditioning fine? Is there anything else you need?
That's
You
true.
need water?" So this is an Indian way of expressing. One of the foreign guests that we had said, "Hey, I don't want to be annoyed so much. Like, I've already said everything's good. So please stop annoying me and bothering me. I'm really good and I will tell you if I need anything." So this is a cultural difference. It does,
That's true.
even to this year, I think it does happen quite
Mm-hmm.
often because people are not exposed to different cultures, and it sometimes comes more out of concern, especially
Mm-hmm.
when somebody is from a different place. You want to make sure, at least the Indian culture, the Indian scenarios, that yeah, we want to make sure we really give all the comfort we can to the
That's
person
true.
who's
Yes.
interested.
So now you're working for an international company, which is Google. So I am sure you are in touch with people from all around the world.
Yes, that's right.
So do you feel you are communicating in a different way depending on who you are talking to? Or do you feel you are using the same way?
I think always I've tried to communicate with different people in different ways because I feel that there's a personal connection I make with that
True.
style of communication, right? I understand that, when we work for big brands, big companies, there's usually a very standard format of communication or standard
Hmm.
way of doing things, but they do not obviously restrict you from doing anything other than that. One of the things that I always feel is it gives me more connect. It helps me build more trust when I, use that style of communication with the different
Okay.
customized styles of communication with different people.
Oh,
So
so you would not express yourself the same way depending on who you are talking to.
exactly, I
Like
think,
being direct or indirect, for example,
yeah,
because some culture you have to go straight to the point.
absolutely,
Other culture you have to, uh,
absolutely.
talk a little bit before you are actually telling them what you want to tell them.
Exactly. Exactly. So I work across with so many different people across different nationalities and countries. So
Hmm.
obviously, there's a difference between the way we communicate from country to country. Like I communicate a lot of times with people from Israel, where I
Okay,
have part of my team. They are very direct. A
that's
lot of
true.
times
Yeah,
people feel that, oh my God, they are so rude, but that's not true. They don't mean to.
yeah. They're just telling you straight to the point what they
They're
think
coming
about
straight
it.
to the point. They don't mean to insult you or disrespect you. You just learn that with time that hey, they don't want to waste your time or waste theirs. And they don't want to
Exactly.
sugarcoat things and they just want to tell you the reality. And even if it's something good, they just tell it to you without exaggerating it or putting too much flowery language and words into it. Right.
I think in the Netherlands, it's very the same. In the Netherlands, if they have something to tell you, they go straight to the point. But if you go to Asia, I think there's a lot of Asian country where they beat around the bush. They try to make you understand what they mean, but sometimes if you're not used to it, you just don't get it.
Absolutely.
So you need to be used to it.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah, that's true. So to finish this interview, I know that some people have never been to India and they are kind of confused about how is the country. So imagine someone is listening to this podcast and they want to, you know, do some business with Indians or they are going to work in India. What advice as an Indian person would you give them so that they won't be lost in translation and surprised by the way their Indian colleagues are going to behave or talk to them?
Firstly, anybody choosing to come to India for work, for business, we are always here to welcome you. And some of the things that could make, adaptation easier or some things that you may want to know earlier is in India, I think one of the most important things is don't get really overwhelmed by the number of different cultures you're seeing, food varieties you're seeing, number of different colors you're seeing across different places, even in one single place, right? Population. India is a very hugely populated, heavily populated place. Especially when you're coming from an outside country, it might seem like your whole country is in one city. Don't get scared of that.
Yes.
Crowded because of the population density. We have a smaller area, but a lot of people living in it.
Hmm.
Secondly, was what I would, yeah. Third thing is Indians generally indulge in a lot of conversation uh, in terms of when they meet a new person, irrespective of whether they meet them for the first time or whether they've just known them from after meeting once. It is quite common for people to ask you who's in your family, a few personal
Yes.
questions, not extremely
Personal
personal,
questions.
personal questions. In
Yes.
Indian culture, it's just a matter of getting to know a person a little better.
Mm.
I have noticed that in other cultures, that could kind of be an infringement of person's privacy.
That's true. Like in my country, it would be seen as someone who is too curious about us or wants to know too many things, because in France, we tend to separate professional life and personal life.
Absolutely.
But
This
in
is what
India, it's very common to talk about yourself as a person.
Yes. So I think in most Indian introductions, if you start doing business with people in India or working with Indian colleagues, and if you ever start doing introductions, the first thing you will hear from most Indians are not just their name and what they do, but also the place they're from, the language they speak, the number of people in the family, and you will,
Yes,
or without
this is what
asking
I've
this
noticed as well.
information that will be shared with you. It will sound overwhelming, but I think now a lot of people have understood that it's your interest if you'd like to share or if you don't like to. So that's one of the most important differences you'll find when you start interacting with people.
I think in India, if you are willing to give more information about yourself, this is a way to have a better connection
Absolutely. I think
with the
that's where they
people.
form interests from, try to find common topics they can talk about,
True.
try to see how they can, help you better. And in general, Indians are people who seek a lot of company for everything, whether
Mm.
it's to go and grab a coffee or, a meal, or whether it's to go shopping to a mall, or whether it is to even go to a movie, and sometimes even just to, go to one place in the office, from one place to in the office to another place, like getting stationery. So there's a lot of, hey, I'll accompany you. I don't want to let you do it alone. This is
That's true. This is what I've
very
noticed as
important
well.
cultural aspect we've seen. Um, yeah, if you do find this overwhelming, do tell people that, you're comfortable doing things on your own. I'm sure they will understand these days. But
Mm.
in general, Indians like a lot of company around them and they like giving
This
company to people.
is a country where the group is important. Like it's not
Yes,
an individualistic society.
exactly.
It's
Exactly.
very people do things together.
Yes.
This is
And
true.
don't be surprised if you, ever fall sick and reach out to your Indian friends. Don't be surprised if they, drop by your door to like give you medicine or something that'll help you feel better. Uncalled for, unplanned, untold. It can happen.
Yeah, they're taking care of your health. And I even have a colleague, so he's from the US, and when he was working in Mumbai, he would tell me sometimes I had Indian friends coming to my place at 9:30 p.m. They would ring my door, say, "Hey, can we have dinner with you?" And he would be saying, "Well, I'm going to go to bed soon, so sorry, I can't have dinner with you now," like it was during the week. So he
Right.
was saying that a number of his Indian friends would just show up at his place very late at night. Well, that he would consider late.
Correct.
But for his friend, it was just, yeah, we're having dinner at 9 or 9:30, so let's go to his place. But he would say, no, sorry, it's not possible. So this is an interesting cultural difference as well. Like in
And
India, people can have dinner very late.
yes, dinners are very late. Lunches are rushed in the middle of work.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we don't have the
Mm.
nice concept of enjoying and enjoying and indulging in lunch like in France. And of course, people eat a good breakfast in most Indian households. You will be surprised by the amount of food Indians eat during the morning,
That's
as opposed
true.
to a lot of other Western cultures. And yeah, these are some of the things that you'll notice quite easily when you come into India. But there's a lot. There's really a lot that
That's
you'll
true. And I think I could do like a whole podcast just about food, because food
yes,
is kind of culture, and I'm pretty sure I could have a whole podcast, like
absolutely
a whole episode
episode.
about just Indian food, because this is so rich. Well, Kushal, thank you very much for your time. I know you're very busy, and I really appreciate that you took some time to do this podcast. I wish you a good afternoon. It's the afternoon now in India.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, for now, I am going to go out and eat somewhere, because my city, Lyon, is the capital of gastronomy, and I'm going to eat in a typical restaurant from Lyon. So, something I could talk about in another
Bon
podcast.
appétit.
Merci beaucoup, and I hope I will see you very soon in Bangalore then.
Yes. Thank you so much for this
À
opportunity.
bientôt. Au revoir. Bye.